Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast.
It is great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you with us today. If you're listening to this right now, you're likely a modern professional, maybe a team leader, or just someone who's constantly looking for that, strategic edge when it comes to business efficiency.
Right. And today we are tackling a challenge that affects absolutely every single company on the planet.
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal pain point, but almost nobody is executing it perfectly yet. We're doing a deep dive into the mechanics of bringing people onto your team.
Which is notoriously difficult to get right.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at this incredibly insightful piece of writing by Felix Römer. It's directly from smartkeys.org, and it's titled Gamified Onboarding, Using Game Elements to Engage New Hires.
That's a fantastic resource.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is highly strategic. We are going to extract the most actionable, high-impact strategies from this material to help you take those routine, friction-heavy, and honestly, sometimes mind-numbingly boring employee orientations.
We've all been there.
Right. And transform them into highly motivating, productive journeys.
It's a critical conversation to have, especially right now, because when most leaders hear the word onboarding, they instinctively picture a towering stack of HR paperwork.
Or a massive PDF handbook that nobody actually reads.
Exactly. A dozen confusing login screens spread across different departments.
Mm-hmm.
But what Felix Römer lays out here shifts that entire paradigm. We shouldn't be looking at onboarding as just some administrative HR checklist.
It's much bigger than that.
It is. It needs to be treated as a core future of work strategy. To really grasp the stakes of why this matters, we have to look at how human beings fundamentally interact with new digital systems today.
That is the perfect jumping-off point because the underlying research uses a real-world analogy that perfectly captures the friction you're facing when you bring a new hire onto your team.
I love this analogy.
It's so relatable. I want you to think about the last time you downloaded a brand new mobile app on your phone. You saw an ad for it, it looked useful, you installed it, and you opened it up.
And then what happens?
Well, the statistics show that up to 83% of mobile app installers quit within the first 24 hours.
83%.
It is a staggering abandonment rate. 83% gone in a single day. Furthermore, 25% of users abandon an app after a single use. And if you ask them why, the answers are always the same.
It was too confusing.
Exactly. The interface was overwhelming, or they simply didn't see the immediate value. Now, take that exact same behavioral phenomenon, that rapid churn and severe cognitive overload, and map it onto your new hires during their first few weeks on the job.
It's the exact same dynamic.
When they log into your company's internal portal for the first time, they're experiencing that exact same app abandonment fatigue.
Which is why the concept of gamification in this context is so misunderstood.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't about making work a literal video game.
Right, we're not handing out virtual swords and shields.
No, we aren't talking about adding flashy neon lights, virtual slot machines, or meaningless high scores to your payroll software. Gamification, in a business context, is about carefully applying the behavioral mechanics that inherently keep human beings engaged in a process.
And the results speak for themselves.
They really do. The data we're looking at indicates that implementing effective gamification during onboarding can lift employee retention by as much as 50%.
Wow.
Let's contextualize that. A 50% increase in retaining your top talent simply by redesigning the flow to show them value quickly and reduce the cognitive load on their brain.
That's huge.
When you factor in the sheer financial cost of recruiting, hiring, and replacing an employee who quits after 3 months, a 50% retention lift is a massive, tangible business outcome. It impacts the bottom line directly.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to know the mechanics behind that 50% lift. How do we actually restructure the psychology of a new hire's first week to get those kinds of results?
It starts with adopting the core design philosophy outlined in the research. Any successful onboarding experience needs to be guided by 3 North Stars.
And those are?
Usefulness, ease, and fun. If a digital experience hits those 3 marks, user participation naturally increases. From a psychological standpoint, this works because you are actively simplifying the path to success.
Taking the friction out of the equation.
Precisely. By stripping away the corporate noise and the administrative clutter, the user can clearly see their own progress. They feel instantly rewarded for taking the right actions. And because the friction is gone, their brain has the bandwidth to actually learn the material faster.
So instead of dropping them in the middle of a dense forest and hoping they find the office, you're giving them a very clear, brightly lit breadcrumb trail.
That is a great way to visualize it. And making that breadcrumb trail effective relies heavily on a psychological concept known as the Zeigarnik effect.
Ah, yes, the Zeigarnik effect.
Felix Römer captures this perfectly in the text. He says, and I quote, "Unfinished tasks pull attention, make them visible to invite completion.
It's so true. Human brains genuinely dislike open loops.
We hate them." Think about watching a television show that ends on a massive cliffhanger. It bothers you until you can watch the next episode.
It's a subtle psychological itch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a digital interface, when we see a progress bar that's sitting at 80% full, it creates that exact same itch. We desperately want to scratch it by taking whatever small action is required to reach 100%.
We see this everywhere in consumer tech, and the numbers backing it up are just incredible. Let's look at LinkedIn as a prime example.
A classic case study.
We've all logged in and seen that little visual progress bar telling us we're just one step away from having an all-star profile.
Right, it usually asks for something simple.
Exactly, like adding one more past job description or profile photo. According to the case studies Rumor highlights, when LinkedIn added those subtle visual cues and nudges, they experienced a 55% lift in profile completion across their user base.
That is tens of millions of people taking action simply because a visual bar told them they were almost finished.
And then you look at a platform like Duolingo, which has practically mastered this science. By introducing daily streaks and small point accumulations, making the act of returning to the app a clear, simple, and rewarded action, their user retention skyrocketed from roughly 13% all the way to 55%.
That kind of jump is astronomical when you're managing user behavior at scale. Millions of people diligently maintain 100-day streaks on Duolingo, not because they love conjugating verbs, but because those behavioral mechanics provide consistent, predictable hits of dopamine.
And it doesn't even have to be a complex site-wide point system to get that dopamine hit. Take a project management tool like Asana.
Oh, the flying unicorns.
Yes. They utilize what we call micro-celebrations. You finish a project, you click the check mark, and a little animation of a unicorn or a narwhal flies across your screen.
It sounds entirely trivial.
It does, but in the moment, it effectively signals progress and validates the effort you just expended.
It gives you that little boost.
Let me stop you there, though, because I can hear some skeptical leaders thinking, well, if we just hand out flying unicorns every time someone clicks a box, aren't we just encouraging them to mindlessly click through their training without actually retaining any of the information?
That is a very valid concern.
How do we prevent this from becoming a superficial clicking exercise?
That's the exact trap many organizations fall into, and it brings us to a critical constraint. The power of these gamified mechanics relies entirely on their limits.
Limits are key.
Absolutely. If you give a new hire a checklist with 40 items on their first day, you aren't gamifying their experience. You are inducing panic.
For sure. I'd close my laptop immediately.
Shortlists are the antidote to anxiety. They guide action by narrowing focus. The data shows that providing a tightly constrained checklist, specifically limited to just 3 to 5 high-impact items combined with a progress indicator, can lift activation rates by about 40% in HR platforms.
So you're breaking a massive mountain of information down into a few highly manageable base camps.
Yes. What's fascinating here is how these small, constrained design choices compound when you stack them. If you take that strict 3-item checklist and pair it with instant feedback quizzes, you suddenly have a weapon against the forgetting curve.
For those who might not be familiar with the term, the forgetting curve is that psychological phenomenon where humans forget roughly 70% of new information within 24 hours, unless they're forced to actively recall it.
That's why sitting through a 4-hour compliance lecture is almost entirely useless.
By the next morning, the employee has forgotten almost all of it.
Which is why gamification shifts the model to active learning. Instead of a 4-hour video, they watch a 3-minute module, immediately answer a 2-question quiz to earn a completion badge, and move on.
The instant feedback forces the brain to retrieve the information.
Yes, which cements it in their long-term memory.
I see the logic of breaking things down and adding these interactive elements, but practically speaking, this brings up a major operational hurdle.
The tech side of things.
Exactly. When I hear phrases like instant feedback quizzes, dynamic progress bars, and contextual pop-up nudges, I immediately start thinking about the technical overhead.
It sounds expensive.
It sounds like a nightmare for IT. I imagine an HR director listening to this, nodding along, and then thinking, great idea, I'll just submit a ticket to my IT department, and maybe in 2 or 3 years we'll have a progress bar on our portal.
The classic IT bottleneck.
How do businesses actually build these interactive flows without getting bogged down in endless engineering bottlenecks?
That is a very real bottleneck, but the solution is already here, and it's a major focus of Romer's insights. The key to executing this strategy lies in empowering your HR and enablement teams through no-code platforms.
No code is a game changer.
You absolutely do not need to wait on an engineering team to hard code these flows from scratch.
Meaning an HR manager without a computer science degree can act essentially like a product manager for their own employees.
Precisely. With modern no-code builders, your training team can visually drag and drop a progress bar onto the screen. They can build those 3-item checklists, and they can trigger timely pop-up banners directly inside your existing software environment.
And because they aren't waiting on developers, it unlocks the ability to do rapid A/B testing.
Because we shouldn't just be guessing what motivates our team, right?
What?
We need the data.
Exactly. You can run small, controlled experiments. Say you want new hires to complete their tax forms faster.
Right.
You can test whether a large banner at the top of the screen works better than a subtle tooltip hovering next to the profile icon.
You look at the analytics, see which one drove more clicks, and you iterate.
Felix Römer actually calls out a few specific software vendors that are leading the charge here, which is helpful for anyone looking to build out this tech stack.
Having practical examples is always good.
He points to UserPilot, which is designed specifically for building those interactive checklists, adding progress indicators, and running that crucial in-app A/B testing we just talked about. And then there is Centrical, which takes a slightly different angle. It focuses on linking gamification directly to performance metrics and continuous coaching during that critical ramp-up period for a new employee.
The landscape of tools is vast, but regardless of which specific vendor a company goes with, the strategic mandate is seamless integration.
It all has to talk to each other.
Yes. These gamification layers have to talk to your existing infrastructure, your HR information systems, or HRIS, and your learning management systems.
Let's ground that in a real-world scenario. When we talk about integration, we're really talking about automating cohorts, right?
Yes. Think of it this way. When Sarah, your new senior accountant, logs into the system on Monday morning, the platform should instantly recognize her role, her department, and her seniority level.
Because it's integrated with your HRIS.
Exactly. It automatically skips the generic sales training modules and dynamically loads a customized 3-step checklist specifically tailored for a senior finance role.
Nobody in HR had to manually assign her a single task. The system just knows.
That creates a frictionless experience on the back end for your HR team, which allows them to provide a frictionless experience on the front end for Sarah.
That is the dream scenario right there.
This raises an important question, though, for the executive team holding the budget. How do we measure the ROI of investing in these software tools and taking the time to redesign these flows?
Right. How do we prove it works?
The framework for this is actually very concrete. You have to track specific engagement signals. You look at task completion rates and the time it takes to complete them. Crucially, you need to visualize your funnel drop-offs.
The leaky bucket metric.
Exactly. Imagine pulling up your analytics dashboard and seeing that out of 100 new hires, 95 complete the welcome video, but only 40 make it past the cybersecurity quiz.
That's a huge drop-off.
But now you know exactly where the friction is. You know exactly which module is causing cognitive overload and needs to be redesigned.
There is a fantastic principle from the material on this exact point. Felix Römer states, what you measure improves, make progress visible to improve outcomes.
It really is that straightforward.
If you aren't actively tracking where people stall out in the process, you have no idea how to fix the leak. Beyond just tracking who clicked what, you're ultimately measuring the speed to value.
Right. You're combining those task completion metrics with actual learning outcomes, like quiz scores, and direct manager observations to track retention and time to productivity. That is how you prove the value to leadership.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a lot of ground.
We really have.
We've talked about the psychology of the Zeigarnik effect, the necessity of no-code tech stacks, and tracking funnel drop-offs. But zooming all the way out, how does gamifying an onboarding flow actually help a business stay ahead of the competition? How does this make an organization more resilient?
When you synthesize all of these tactical changes, they all point toward one overarching competitive advantage: a drastically shorter path to value.
Getting them up to speed faster.
We often refer to this as product activation. In an HR context, product activation is that magic moment when an employee stops reading about how to do their job and actually completes their first meaningful independent task.
That's a great definition.
By using gamification to engineer a series of highly visible small wins, you drastically shorten that ramp time. When new hires aren't paralyzed by a 40-item to-do list, they move faster. They reach competence sooner.
And from the employee's perspective, they stop feeling like a burden to their new manager who has to explain everything twice, and they start feeling like a genuine contributor.
That early confidence is infectious.
It sets the tone for their entire tenure at the company. But I want to play devil's advocate for a moment.
Go for it.
Is there a risk here of over-gamifying? If we start introducing leaderboards and points, couldn't that turn day one into a cutthroat competition? I would imagine that could alienate a lot of people who are just trying to learn the ropes.
That is a very astute point. And the research provides strong guardrails to prevent exactly that. Gamification, if implemented purely as a competitive tool, can backfire spectacularly.
It creates the wrong kind of pressure.
Instead of motivating people, it can generate intense toxic stress. To make this work, you have to design for psychological safety. The text gives us a very clear directive here. Focus recognition on mastery and improvement to protect psychological safety.
So it's about competing with yourself, not others.
Exactly. The goal of gamifying onboarding is never to highlight who the best or fastest new hire is. The goal is to celebrate individual mastery and personal improvement.
So practically speaking, what do those design guardrails look like? How do we keep it motivating without making it stressful?
First and foremost, any social features or visible leaderboards should be strictly opt-in. You have to design with the understanding that many people prefer privacy while they are learning and will feel unnecessary pressure if they're forced into a social comparison.
That makes total sense. Give them the choice.
Second, if you do utilize leaderboards, you must segment them by cohort.
Right, because if you put a brand new junior developer on a public leaderboard next to a 10-year senior architect, that junior developer isn't going to feel motivated. They are going to feel terrified.
Precisely. It kills morale instantly. And third, you shift the focus of the rewards. Instead of rewarding individual rank, you reward collaborative team wins or personal bests.
Fostering teamwork instead of rivalry.
You want the gamification to bring a cohort together to achieve a shared goal, rather than pitting them against each other for a top score.
That distinction changes the entire dynamic. It transforms the system from a ranking tool into a support structure. And building on that idea of creating a supportive environment, true efficiency requires accessibility.
It's non-negotiable.
The source material emphasizes inclusive design. You have to meet the employee where they are.
Which means mobile readiness is no longer optional. A new hire should be able to securely review a policy or check off a task on their phone while they are commuting on the train.
It also means recognizing that people process information differently. Inclusive design means providing multiple ways to engage with the same material.
Not everyone learns the same way.
Right. Maybe one person retains information best by reading a text summary, while another needs a short video, and a third prefers an interactive scenario-based quiz.
By offering those varying formats, you ensure that people with different learning styles or neurodivergent traits can succeed without facing artificial barriers.
When you personalize the path and remove those barriers, gamification stops being a corporate gimmick and becomes a highly effective, empathetic onboarding strategy.
It's just good leadership.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We've explored the behavioral psychology, the software implementation, and the guardrails for psychological safety. But we want to leave you with a highly practical, immediate takeaway.
Something you can actually implement today.
If you were going to take just one action after listening to this deep dive, the data points to a very specific place to start: the welcome flow.
It is absolutely the highest leverage point in the entire employee journey.
The research shows that implementing a simple, friendly welcome screen that asks just one or two personalized questions about the user's role right at the very beginning can raise activation rates by roughly 47%.
That's an incredible return on investment for one screen.
Think about that. Nearly a 50% boost in engagement just from a screen that says, "Hi, what is your primary focus in this role?" and then tailoring the next 3 steps based on their answer.
The explicit advice here is not to try and gamify the entire first year of employment in one massive project.
That would be overwhelming for the HR team.
Pick one minimal viable flow like that first day welcome sequence, build it, launch it this month, measure the drop-off rates, and iterate.
Start small, proves the concept with data, and then expand the program with confidence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Throughout this deep dive, we focused almost entirely on new hires. But consider the underlying mechanics we've discussed. The Zeigarnik effect, the strict three-item constraints, the micro-celebrations, and instant feedback.
The fundamentals of motivation.
If these simple tools can accelerate a new hire's learning curve so dramatically and cut their cognitive load in half, imagine the compounding ROI of applying these exact same gamified guardrails to your legacy employees.
Oh, that's fascinating. Upskilling the veterans.
Imagine treating the rollout of a complex new piece of enterprise software for a team that has been there for 10 years with the exact same care, structure, and gamification as day one of onboarding.
That could change everything.
You could potentially eliminate mid-career stagnation entirely by making continuous upskilling feel just as guided, effortless, and rewarding as their very first week on the job.
That is a profound paradigm shift. Treat every major transition, every promotion, and every upskilling moment with the same intentional design as day one.
It's the key to a truly agile workforce.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. If you found this strategic breakdown valuable and want to keep optimizing your approach to leadership and business efficiency, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an analysis.
It's been a great conversation.
And I highly encourage you to read Felix Römer's full article to see all the data, the case studies, and the visual examples firsthand. You can find the direct link to the full text right down in the show notes. Until next time, keep looking for the smart keys to unlock your team's potential.